All right. Hello, Facebook. And thank you guys so much for joining us today. We are about to populate the stream on Zoom. We are going to go ahead and start the webinar and get everyone here. But for those of you on Facebook, thank you so much for joining us today. It's going to be a really fun masterclass with Mr. Charlie Rosemarin, who's joining us on Vibraphone. Just making sure that everyone can get into the stream. Hello, everybody. Here we go. Everyone is finding the stream. This is excellent. Awesome, awesome. We're just going to wait one more minute. We started a minute early today, guys. But Charlie has a very, very exciting class for us today. He's got more stuff than you're even going to have room for. If you got a Vibraphone appetite, you're going to leave full today. You should have seen this outline this guy sent to me. It was incredible. He's got 14 pages of outline for the class, guys. It's awesome. We've got a lot of videos to share. We've got some PDFs to share. And of course, this class is being recorded. So if you miss it or if you want to jump in and out of the stream, no problem. It will be up on our website afterwards with the PDF included inside the video. But thank you guys so much for being here live so that you can ask your questions to Charlie. Please notice that at the bottom of your screen, there is the ability to ask a question via the Q&A. And please, as the class is going along, drop your questions into that Q&A, guys, so that you can, Charlie will be able to get your message and be able to answer it for you in depth. He will start the class as a clinic, so you'll be able to see him play and teach. And then at the end, we will do all of the questions. Today, it's just me here. I'm Josh Vonderheide. I'm the founder of the Percussion Conservatory. Our events manager, Steven Keener, is busy. He is starting his first week. He's getting ready for opening week at the Oregon Symphony, but he has been an essential part of getting these classes together. So shout out to Steven. Thank you for all his help. And the Percussion Conservatory is putting on these back-to-school master classes, which are a series of 5 classes on different percussion instruments, all geared towards helping our audience, hopefully, learn and become better percussionists. And anyone who's interested in pursuing a career in classical percussion, the Percussion Conservatory is for you. So guys, let's go ahead and get this class started. I am joined, as I said before, by Charlie Rosemarin, who is our featured artist for today. He is a Juilliard School graduate. He is a New England Conservatory graduate. He did further studies with Ted Atkatz at the Colburn School before becoming now a veteran player with the New World Symphony. He has toured the world with Juilliard's 415 group, doing early music all over the world and a lot of new music as well. Charlie and I have played a bunch of Steve Reich together. We were one of the first performances of many new works together at Juilliard and in other places as well. It's been quite the career since we joined school together as freshmen, and coming full circle now in the professional realm is really fun and exciting. So Charlie, thank you so much for all the work that you put in to get ready for this class. We are ready for you. So please go ahead and tell us what your class is about today, and we'll go ahead and get started.
Yeah, great. Well, thank you so much for that intro. Hi, I'm Charlie. This is going to be a class all about the vibraphone here, some of the things I've learned about playing it, playing some transcriptions and, the many excerpts that we have. And yeah, I think that the title of the class sort of refers to, well, I was suggesting rep we might cover, and we kind of realized so much of it comes from sort of the cinema, and it's a little bit of just a coincidence really, but there is something to just all the sort of imagery that gets evoked with an instrument like this. So I'm going to start with playing a few excerpts for you, and then we'll launch into the class. So let's get started. Great. So let's get started talking about the vibraphone. A couple things I just want to start with talking about how we just generally set ourselves up at the instrument, kind of just approaching it. Just kind of if it's your first time playing on an instrument, or you're maybe not the last person to have played on the instrument, just a couple things to kind of use as a checklist. I always start by looking at the spindle, which runs across the top of the resonators. It has these little discs, which of course are what spin when the motor's on, and I just always make sure that those are vertical or near vertical on both the naturals and accidentals, because when they flatten, they're blocking the resonators, and that's kind of the source of all of our tone. And if you've ever seen a mallet instrument played without the resonators on, you'll notice just how incredibly thin the sound is of the instrument, and so just really the core of our sound comes from the resonators. And when that spindle is blocking the resonators, I mean, it can just lead to a lot of bafflement during your practicing of like, why is my sound so inconsistent? Why why do I sound thinner every time I go to, say, the accidentals? So you better unblock those resonators. The next thing I check on is the pedal height. I start by just pressing the pedal so that it's almost touching the floor, just like maybe a millimeter or two off the floor. I make sure that the muffle pad of felt that runs underneath the bars is fully clear off of the bars along the full range of the instrument. And if it's still slightly in contact, then you unscrew the thing down there and you adjust it as necessary so that you're getting full clearance there. And then I release the pedal and check that height. You don't want it to be too high. You don't want to be straining your ankle really when you're fully releasing the pedal, because it just leads to a lot of tension in your shin, and that kind of accumulates both over the course of a practice session and also a performance. So that's kind of my checklist with pedals and the resonators. I think that I once heard Peter Erskine saying about the pedal, like he was saying about the hi-hat, that he thinks of there being 7 degrees of openness on the hi-hat. It's not just open and shut all the way. He thinks of like those sort of degrees of sizzle between open and shut. I guess in his own system of thinking, he thinks of there being 7 degrees there. I think we can think kind of similarly about the pedal, that there's fully dry and fully wet, but there's also these sort of kind of degrees of release that the pedal can be giving, and it's not fully live, not fully dead, but we want a comfortable access to that range, basically. We want our ankle to be in a nice, comfortable position to do all of that, to reach all those degrees of openness. Okay. You might run into a number of different types of pedal on the vibraphone. The ones I'm familiar with, there's sometimes a large horizontal bar that kind of runs across the entire range of the instrument. That you end up having to slide your foot along it as you travel up and down the instrument. The other type you see a lot of is this sort of fan style thing. That's what I'm working on here. Sometimes that on older vibraphones, sometimes that's fixed in place, and you have to sort of keep your one foot sort of attached on it, and it can lead to some sort of postural, you end up having to kind of turn your body to adjust with it. But my favorite type is this sort of swiveling fan style thing, which allows you to kind of move around easily with it and just keep a certain amount of foot pressure on the pedal at all times so that it can move with you. Okay. You'll notice that a lot of the exercises and warm-ups I'm going to show you, they actually are designed to sort of span a couple octaves at sort of a minimum of the instrument, and part of that is to just get comfortable with both shifting my weight around back, up and down the range of the instrument, but also to like navigate the pedal, because it's just one of those things that you don't want to be adjusting to it as you're performing. You want to already be kind of comfortable with the instrument and already adapting yourself to like, all right, in the low range I need to stand maybe a little bit, with a wider stance like that. Okay. So, oh yeah, and one thing about stance. I'm a lefty. I prefer planting on my left foot, and using my right foot on the pedal might be the opposite for you. I don't know that there's any advantages or disadvantages to that, but keep in mind, sort of in your mental practice and all that, which way your hips kind of are going to be turned if you're, say, reaching the high range of the instrument versus the low range. And if you're a righty and you plant with your opposite foot, it might be the opposite for you. Okay, so let's talk about how we manage the dryness or the wetness of the bars. I got a lot of questions about that when I was asking about topics for this class. And my feeling with dryness and wetness is that we can get a sense of what's appropriate, like how much pedal to use in our practice rooms. We can get like a sort of general sense, but I think you never really truly know until you've brought the vibraphone to a large resonance space, whatever you have available, and do kind of a sound check there with a friend. You play for them, they play for you, and you really get to hear how the instrument sounds with distance and resonance in a larger room, because I think that should really be our deciding factor there. Generally, I tend to believe that totally dry isn't a very desirable sound in most cases. We don't want to get in the habit of playing, for too long of a time with just like absolutely zero pedal. Actually, so for the sake of this class, I'm actually going to do a fair bit of that, because with the pedal open, it seems to be reacting with the microphone in a certain way. So I'm going to play a certain amount of dry material, like zero pedal stuff, but I think in general that is not a sort of performance-friendly approach to the pedal. But also, neither is totally open. There's just not many cases where you want to play, a full phrase with the pedal open. Roughly speaking, I basically never want the bars to be totally dry for like 3 or more notes. I generally just start to feel like, the presentation gets a little flat. And then same with the open pedal. I think I never really want to have a totally wet acoustic environment for more than like 4 notes while I play. So those are kind of my boundaries, and there's all kinds of wiggle room inside of that. So I personally think of when it comes to actually using the foot pedal, there's really 3 different types of pedaling that 3 different uses of the pedal. I think the first one is kind of this seamless lyrical style of playing when you're maybe playing a melody that just needs continuity and line. You're trying to clear the pedal as close to a next note beginning as possible, so the prior note is still like getting some ring, and then you sort of drop the pedal and raise it like right as soon as you can before the next note. It's kind of like the way a woodwind player breathes. They try and sneak that in as short amount of time as they can before the next note. It takes a little bit of precision to do that, because if you're late with that, then okay, when the pedal can end up slightly muffling the next note, and then you end up with like a half pedaled note, and it just can really kind of destroy the continuity of a line. So you really, you want to opt maybe a little early. You need to be pretty aware of when you're using this type of pedaling, just because it does need precision. You don't have a lot of leniency for being late there. The next type of pedaling, I think we're all pretty familiar with it. I think it's the easiest type. I sort of think of it as like a Morse code style thing, when the music is clearly organized into like a long, short type of phrasing. I think West Side Story is like a great exemplifier of this. You can hear like it's just it's pretty clearly delineated. Some notes are just short, and some notes are just long, and you raise the pedal on the short notes like basically exactly as you play it, and it's pretty easy to do. It's also just not the most classical style phrasing thing. I think it comes up the most in types of playing that are sort of jazzy and evoking that style. It's pretty rare that we get like sort of classically lyrical material, and then that type of pedaling, to me at least, feels like all that appropriate. It's very just sort of like cut and dry type phrasing. And then this third type of pedaling I want to talk about is called flutter pedaling, or some people call it feather pedaling. So like I was saying, if pedal all the way up is 0% wet, and if you lower the pedal fully, that's 100%. I think of flutter pedaling as sort of living between the like 20% to 80% range. Kind of like that Peter Erskine hi-hat thing. It's like somewhere in this sort of mid-range where the pedal is maybe not fully cleared for like several notes, but you're kind of just sort of easily, sort of fluttering the pedal, as you can see, like just sort of easing it off and back onto the bars in a sometimes arrhythmic kind of way. I use it when the music doesn't like naturally lend itself to like natural note groupings that are clearly present, like that seamless woodwind style pedaling. If the music is clearly delineated in like 3 to 5 note passages, then great. Like I just sort of know to use that. But flutter pedaling, on this Jennifer Higdon excerpt I just played, like there's scales, and I really think of flutter pedaling as being great for like scalar passages because there's no clear, seam in the material, and you just want a general sense of resonance going with what you're playing. But flutter pedaling just helps you kind of keep a sort of aura of resonance around what you're doing without just committing to just pedal down, pedal up for too long. I think in terms of like degree of pedaling and speed with flutter pedaling, I think of it kind of like woodwind players or string players would think of vibrato. It's not just a static, choose your rate of flutter pedaling and stick with it. It's very, I think, contextual, depends on like the speed of the music, the dynamic, the color you're going for, and really the character. So that's like a really intuitive set of decisions to make for me when I'm deciding to flutter pedal of just how much am I going to do. Am I sort of like following almost on like a every other note basis with my pedal? Am I doing something a little more gradual? And that's my approach to pedaling. When it comes to some finer sort of choices of controlling the resonance, that's when I turn to the hand dampening, the mallet dampening. I kind of think like on timpani, sort of like the way that you have the pedal to reach a note and then you have a fine tuner for the last little finest touches. I think of the same way with hand dampening and mallet dampening. Like the pedal can get you most of the way there, but there are these sort of edge cases where you need just a little bit finer control. Maybe you're playing a double stop and you only want one note to be ringing, or I think it's great for grace note material where you just want like the main note to have resonance and you don't need those grace notes ringing. In one of my transcriptions videos, there was a spot which goes like, and it's just the easiest way to do it is just keep the pedal down and just mute the notes with your hand. Like you could try and thread the needle with the pedal, but again, like it's just, you need to be just laser sharp with it, first of all. Second of all, you need your pedal mechanism to be like really just accurate, because like sometimes we have these pedals that don't fully take the bar out, exactly when you'd like it to. And your hand is great for just taking out, first of all, multiple notes, and also just like exactly when you want it, and it's just less fuss. So let's see, grace note gestures. Yeah, I think of the use of it kind of like timpani, same way. Like when you're playing a melody on timpani, sometimes you can afford to do enough muffling and get only one note sounding at a time. That's kind of an ideal, and I think the same way with a lot of things on vibraphones. If you can get a melody like, just get one note sounding at a time, then like great, it's a really nice clean thing to do, and you don't have to sort of get manic with the pedal, which introduces its own host of problems. So yeah, I've with hand dampening, I've gravitated towards using a lot of thumb to do my muting lately. I've it's just right there. You don't have to move your hand a large distance. You just can sort of reach off the stick with your thumb, but of course you can also use the back 3 fingers are a good option. You can kind of fan them out on the bar, similarly without like having to do anything all too wacky with your grip. You can also do both, where you sort of hook the mallet with your index finger, and that's really the only thing holding on for a second as you might take out, say like 4 notes or so. My approach, again, like not to keep comparing this all to timpani, but I think similarly on timpani, you kind of mute from the edge of the head. You don't go right for the center because the vibration there is like a little more violent and more likely to kind of create extraneous noise as you touch down. Similarly with vibraphone, like it's just kind of nice to sort of approach maybe from the nodal area. You don't need to like actually, start right there, but just instead of like, reaching right for the center of the bar sometimes, that can really get like a kind of buzzy noise going, and you want it to be silent. Let's see. I think, yeah. So I think a great thing in jazz that keeps getting evoked is this concept of a walking bass line. It comes up in a number of our excerpts, and I think, yeah, hand dampening and mallet dampening is kind of our best bet there. Just when we have just sort of like, you know, these sort of just like, it's I think the closest thing we have to sounding like a walking bass line. Yeah, it comes up all over the rhythm. And really, when the hand basically is maybe a little too clumsy of a technique, when there's not quite enough time to reach down to the bars and then get to playing your next note, that's when mallet dampening comes in. That's when you just put the mallet itself down on the bar. There's that little bit of distance to traverse to get your hand to the bar, and if that's just going to take too much time, or it's going to keep you from being able to play the next few notes, then you just use the mallet head itself. A few things about mallet damping. You want to, again, avoid extraneous noise. It's better to sort of angle the mallet a little bit, aim for this sort of more sort of yarny part of the head. You'll have the core right here, which is going to be one of the harder parts of the mallet. And that's not the best, you want as much cushion as you can on the dampening, so maybe a little bit of angling the mallet, touch down with the yarny part, same deal, like maybe not at the center of the bar, but sort of closer towards the edge. And then just to note, like sometimes in the jazz style, we are taking out the resonance of a grace note so immediately that it is effectively like a dead stroke. And I think that is totally appropriate, it's fine, there's nothing wrong with it, and I've seen a number of people do that for something like the West Side Story, grace notes. And yeah, just finding like the balance that you like of grace note to main note. I mean, what's cool is you can really you can lean in as much as you want on those grace notes, and get all kinds of different kind of attitudes and characters in your playing. Great. Let's start talking about touch. There's just sort of one broad point about touch I'd like to present, and I think on a lot of our instruments, the vibraphone, the xylophone, marimba, snare drum, we sort of have our classical tradition, and then we have these sort of like more folk tradition styles of music that we also play. So there's the rudimental style on snare drum, there's the ragtime music that we play so much on xylophone, there's African marimba playing, and there's jazz music on the vibraphone. And I think the differences between these styles and the classical style is consistently, I think, about touch and the way that we draw colors from the instrument. So I think really the distinguishing factor is that in classical music we are often dealing with very large resonant spaces, and we put a high premium on producing colors which can project, really. We're dealing with a pretty unique challenge of a large resonant space and needing to get our sound pretty directly out there. In these other idioms on these instruments that we sort of borrow from so often, I think the movement that you'll see over and over when in successful performances of this music it's a little bit more throwy and molar-y. You'll see just there's kind of a throwy physicality that people use, and I think that's just as present on rudimental snare drumming as jazz vibraphone, as ragtime xylophone. And I think when in classical music it comes time to really project, we end up basically lifting like crazy is the general advice that you'll hear in countless lessons, and I think that's good advice, really. But like, I just want to note that like there is that lifty stroke which is very valuable to control, but it's not always apropos when it comes to like evoking jazz, say, or ragtime, or military marches for that matter. And I think so. Obviously, the roots of the vibraphone as an instrument are in jazz, and you're going to see a lot of that throwy, kind of loose approach on the instrument with when you look at the great players of jazz vibraphone. So, what's interesting, I think, is that yeah, like when we play vibraphone excerpts on an audition, a lot of our rep is actually in that jazzy style. We're expected to evoke that genre. Like it's a little bit rarer. Like we don't get like too many military like Pratt style snare drum excerpts and not too many ragtime style xylophone excerpts. But on vibraphone, our rep is chock full of like, hey, like evoke jazz. So I think that's something to consider. And also the sound of jazz vibraphone is still like very recent in our cultural memory. So I think again you're expected to kind of evoke a little bit of that. So I think that more than the other instruments I've been talking about, it's probably more appropriate to play with that throwy, sort of loose, molar-y kind of approach on vibraphone when playing our rep. I think it's probably more appropriate there than most other places, and I encourage it. I think certainly getting used to it and making the choice for yourself of how much of it you'd like to sort of bring to your playing. Yeah, I think the vibraphone invites that kind of loose physicality, and just make a point of just exploring like how much can the bars really take of that sort of thrown weight. There is a ceiling, and you can max out the instrument for sure, but sometimes it's higher than you think of. As you reach the higher range of the instrument, you do need to kind of lift out a little bit more, because you end up risking kind of activating the sound of the frame of the instrument. Again, it's the sort of thing that might not seem like a huge deal in a practice room, but it becomes pretty glaring in larger spaces. And once you become attuned to that, the importance of really like lightening up your touch in the high range of the vibraphone, it becomes pretty crucial. But I think, again, we want to explore just how much kind of weight the instrument can take, the bars can take. And, sometimes in a case like this, I mean, these are pretty wide bars, and it goes really low. I mean, this is an extended range vibraphone. And you'll find that this instrument can... You can really lean in a certain way to the bars. And I think that's a worthwhile thing to get comfortable with. Some all-time great exemplifiers of this physicality that I'm talking about that I'd like to maybe bring your attention to if you haven't seen them play. I'm going to name 3 people, and all of them have a good amount of stuff on YouTube there for you to just kind of binge. But in my mind, I love just watching Bob Becker play on xylophone and really any instrument. Wade Colbreth of the LA Chamber Orchestra, he's been putting out these G.H. Green arrangements, which are just incredible. And John Singer of New York, again, just like an incredible xylophone player. There's tons of his material online. And I think we're gonna, Josh, if we can demo a video of Bob Becker playing with Nexus, just for you to see what this kind of touch I'm talking about looks like. So cool. I mean, I think he's like the greatest of all time, and that touch is just he makes it look so easy, but just that fluid, continuous motion style of playing, I think is really great, especially on vibraphone. Okay, let's talk a little bit about developing a full sound on this instrument. I think that we know the general principle that like how you practice is how you perform. I also think that in the context of like a single day, how you warm up is how you play that day. So the kind of things you're focusing on in your warm up kind of become how you're going to play and practice that day. I've found that the best way to work on my sound at the keyboard is through scales, particularly the C major scale. I think that scales are it's a source of a lot of insecurity for a lot of players, and I think that on the flip side, nothing has built more confidence in my keyboard playing than really training scales, and especially the C major scale. I think what happens with a lot of people is they unconsciously grip a little bit tighter when it comes time to play scalar material because they become very focused on note accuracy. They want to get that right. And I think it's important to really learn how to relax into the keyboard when playing really anything, but especially scales, because I just think that's going to bring that sort of kind of hold on tight touch out the most for most people. So yeah, I've found that when you can learn to relax into the keyboard during scales, that sound and that touch, it like pretty quickly kind of permeates the rest of your playing. It like, you know, that sort of easy touch of just you want to just be able to feel like you can play like into the bars, a little bit beneath the bars. And if you can just develop a confidence on scales and arpeggios doing that, I think that just quickly becomes kind of how you generally play. So I'm going to demo a C major scale exercise for you, which its origins actually really come from the first G.H. Green book. And Josh, if you could pull that up, on page 22 of that book, it appears in E flat major, you'll see. And I've just really taken to this exercise. It was shown to me, I think, first by Kevin Rittenauer here, and then I've just sort of put this in all of the keys, and especially C major. It just really has been so useful to me. And yeah, I made a video on Instagram. Maybe you've seen of myself playing this. It really is like if time only permits to do like one warm up, this is going to be the one that I do, because it just calibrates me horizontally to like how wide exactly are these bars. And especially on vibraphone, you know, some instruments you have sort of a graduated set of bars, but I've seen on a lot of vibraphones actually, like, yeah, the bars get wider as you move down the instrument, but there's actually like a very sudden, like, all at once change. Like, so from this G up to the top of the instrument, I can see it's a certain width, and then right here at this F, it sort of changes to a new width, which it sustains maybe down to this G, it seems like. And again, that holds for, like, it sort of like has blocks of width. And all this stuff, you just want to observe this on the instrument you're on. And get a little comfortable navigating that, because it's different to do that than if the bars are kind of continuously, gradually changing, or just not every set of bars is the exact same width. So this is the C major scale. Josh, if you want to pull it up, you can see exactly what I'm going to do. It's basically, you play a ninth up. I lead with my right hand when I'm going up. Yeah, it'll be the next page, I think. Yeah, so it's a ninth up, and then it's a sort of cascading set of fourths going downwards. I personally like to lead with my right hand when it's rising the ninth, and then I turn around after I reach the top C, and then I lead with my left hand on descending scales. So I'm just going to play a little bit of that for you. That is the exercise. Again, when I'm playing that, I'm focusing on, like getting a full sound. I also make a point personally to like vary the amount of emphasis I put on the beginnings of this shapes. It's a good way to get in touch with like my articulation. I think of like putting, varying degrees of tenuto, maybe an accent, or even going all the way to like marcato or staccato at the front of these shapes. For me, that's a really natural way to, again, just sort of channel that arm weight into the bars. I'm just switching it up, switching up my touch, getting different sort of degrees of lift out of the keyboard or throw into the keyboard. For me, that's been really natural to just like develop my touch on this instrument. Yes, okay, so another thing that scales are great for is for developing your visual acuity. I think of it like just the use of the eyes, which again, it's another one of these things like the way we use the pedal that you want to get used to, you want to get acclimated to using your eyes properly during your warm-up and not like during run-throughs of your rep or like a performance or something, because it is just so crucial to accuracy, and again, like the way you warm up is just how you're going to play. So you want to get used to a few things with using your eyes as you play. You want to, first of all, look at the keys and not the mallets. You want to sort of train them to like look through the mallets and be looking at the keys as you play. Once you sort of get that kind of coordination going, then obviously you want to be able to kind of shift your attention from the keyboard up to the mallets, check on like if they're moving smoothly or whatever you'd like to observe about them, and then back and forth. You want like that flexibility there. The next question to think about with visual acuity is like, how far ahead of your hands do you want to put your eyes? Like you don't want to be looking always just exactly at the bar that you're playing, because more material is approaching, and you want to be slightly ahead. But the question of how much, it's a tough question. My personal sort of sense of how to manage it is kind of like, I feel like when I play soccer, as an analogy, when I'm dribbling a soccer ball, generally when the ball tends to get stolen from me the most is when I like accidentally dribble the ball a little bit too hard, kick it a little too hard, and it gets like 5 feet of separation from me instead of like, maybe like 1.5 or 2 feet. You want to like generally keep the ball kind of close to you as you dribble. I think it's the same way with your eyes. Sometimes they can get a little far ahead of what you're playing, and that's, you lose track of where your mallets actually are, and you start dropping some notes there. So yeah, it's kind of a Goldilocks range you want to find of like maybe 3-4 notes ahead of what you're doing, so that you're like your hands are prepared, but also not like left in the dust of where your eyes are looking. Okay. Yes, okay, one last thing about the eyes is that you also want to train yourself to play with the keyboard in the lowest like 15 to 20% of your field of vision. I'm sure we're all used to just like staring at the keyboard and having it in the center of our field of vision, which is natural enough, but I think in ensembles we want to be kind of a heads-up player. We want to get an ease with being able to just sort of, first of all, look around the space at other sections, but most of all at the conductor, who really wants our eyes. Conductors hate seeing the top of our heads, and I think that is our default, kind of like, something tricky comes up and we sort of crane our neck downward and just stare right at the keys. And I think it's a deliberate skill that needs to be trained to like really put the keyboard, it's almost sort of in the lower periphery of your range of vision. Like you need to get a little comfortable with it not being dead center in your sights. So it's just a little bit of self-correction there. I definitely, I'll start by focusing on that, and then inevitably my eyes will like over the course of a minute or two start to drift back down. You have to just sort of course correct and keep like saying like, okay, no, we're keeping the keyboard lower. I'm trying to like, especially if you're learning a keyboard part for an ensemble, you just know it's going to come up. Like you just want to be able to keep in touch with the conductor. A good way to work on this is to have a mirror in the room in front of you. Put it at like maybe 10 feet in front of you, and just try to make eye contact with yourself for as long as you can, because there's really no cheating that. When you're not making eye contact with yourself, you know that like you need to that you've kind of broken your sort of discipline with your eyes, and yeah, it's reasonable to make little peeks down at the keyboard in any ensemble setting, but you just want to see just how far you can push that, like how few check-ins can you get. Again, the better you get with scales and just the kind of trust you get in them, the less you feel like when a scale comes up like, oh boy, I better watch this entire thing, and it becomes more like, okay, I need to maybe like check in every 5-6 notes of a scale, and otherwise, keep my eyes locked on the beat up front. Okay, the next skill, the next warm-up that I'm going to present, which is also great for visual acuity, is arpeggios. They're fantastic for learning to get around the keyboard, and they can also, I found, train your ear. If you practice them with the intent to learn about harmonic progressions, they can really like teach your ear how certain progressions really feel. About jazz, just a little bit about jazz, just like the structure of so many jazz tunes. I mean, it's built on chord progressions. The same way like medieval motets, they're built on a cantus firmus, this repeating cycle that sort of like allows for, you know, all kinds of ornamentation on the top line. Jazz is built on the chord progression. In jazz, some progressions turn into classics and they get rehashed kind of endlessly. In a tune like Autumn Leaves, which is so famous. I mean, I think that its fame is really due more to its chord progression, and it's, you know, less about the melody, and it's more about that kind of like beautiful chord progression, which is like kind of ambiguously major or minor. It kind of toggles between the two. I also find that when I practice arpeggios with sort of these new chord progressions in mind, you start to see harmony a little bit differently. You start to see it less as like a collection of intervals that are stacked on top of a root. You know, I think we're often taught like a major, you know, let's say a dominant 7 chord. Like we're taught like, okay, there's the root, and there's a major third above that, minor third above that, minor third above that, and there's your dominant 7th chord. It's like a snowman of notes. It's not really what it is. You know, like that is technically how you build one, but I think you want to more begin to see it as a kind of like a set of independent voices which are shifting independently from one another as you move through a chord progression. And sometimes just like the smallest little changes in a voice leading in a harmonic progression can make such a radical difference in color and where the progression is going. And when I play arpeggios, you really start to see it that way. I don't really think like note, 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 note as I'm moving around the keyboard. Instead, I'm seeing almost like a static set of pitches that I'm just activating. And as I change harmonies, I see those sort of voice leadings making their shifts. And that to me is just so valuable. I mean, you really understand the kind of like draw and the impact of a harmonic progression when you think of it like that, instead of like this weird like shifting game of like, oh, F sharp went to B to E. Like, well, really that's actually just a couple notes, voices shifting at a time. Okay, so can we pull up that first exercise again, Josh? And I'll just walk through what exactly these chord progressions are. So we're starting in C. The first progression is sort of it's going to be kind of a plagal cadence of F to C. And before we get F, we get B flat, which is the major flat 7 of the key. And so it's kind of like, you could consider it the 4 of 4. It's almost like a supercharged plagal cadence. It comes up a bit in pop music. I've heard it over and over again in the Beatles music. They seem to really enjoy that sound. And so that's just kind of like a personal progression I love. It's not super common, but flat 7, major flat 7 to 4 to 1. The next one, you have, okay, so you're back at C in the 3rd line, and then you go to the 6 of the key, the minor 6, which then goes to, that'll be A minor. Then you go to D minor, which is the 2, and then you have G, which is the 5, and then you're back to 1. And then after that, I do a third sort of progression, which tonicizes C major, wherein I use the German 6. So in this case, that's going to sound like an A flat dominant chord, which then goes to our 5-7 G major in the key, and then that goes back to C. In this last line, you'll see that instead of just like a plain C major, I actually use C9, which is like kind of a dominant chord with a 9th on top of it, and that just is kind of my like signal of like, okay, this progression is going to now shift towards our next key center, which will be F major. So what I do with this progression is I cycle through the circle of fifths. Josh, if you could pull that up, I think it might be a few pages later potentially, because so I mean, you can see the circle of fifths. Oh, there it is. So basically I'm working counterclockwise across the circle. If I start at C, then the next chord I'm gonna, if I go to C9, well, that's gonna tonicize F major, and I play this progression in F. which will then lead to B flat, and I work my way through all of these flat keys until you reach the bottom at G flat, which you can kind of pivot in your brain to being the same as F sharp major, and then you work your way back counterclockwise all through the sharp keys until you reach home again in C. I found that to be a really satisfying way to kind of work through all 12 keys, as opposed to like the chromatically up a half step. You know, that works too, but I just love kind of like moving in that sort of natural circle of fifths pattern. So I'm going to play you that arpeggios exercise. So on. So that's, you know, I landed in F major for a little bit of time there, and that's basically how the thing progresses. It takes maybe about, you know, like 8 minutes or so to work through all 12 keys, and it's just a great way of keeping your mind sharp, like in a music theory sort of way, and just like, again, just accessing pretty much every type of major and minor, triad, and dominant chord on the instrument in all 12 keys. Okay. So the next arpeggios thing I'm going to share, it's a little bit more advanced. No worries if it doesn't make total sense, but you know, you'll see this sheet music at least, and I can explain it to you. It's basically built around, I wanted to get a better understanding of this sort of 2-5-1 progression, which is just kind of like so core to the jazz language. So, you know, you'll hear over and over again people say like, oh yeah, like jazz is built on this 2-5-1 concept. And I just really wanted to, like, again, get comfortable with recognizing it as I both hear it and see it as I play it. So what we do, I've made this progression is entirely 7th chords for starters. So when we're on, like, just, you know, sort of our baseline C major is actually C major 7. And from there we go to minor 2-7, that's D minor 7, and 5-7, that's G major 7. And then actually, instead of completing the 2-5-1 and reaching C again, I turn that G7, I make it a G minor 7, and then that ends up sort of being a 2-5-1 towards the 4 of our key, because we get G minor, C major 7, or C dominant 7, then F major 7. So just for like you kind of have a secondary, what's it called, tonic there, where we're going to tonicize F for just a brief moment. You get F major 7 down there. Then again, you raise the F, if you can scroll down a little bit, please. So we're gonna keep that F major 7 chord the same, but then raise the F to F sharp. So you get this F sharp minor 7 flat 5, which is just like a really colorful and beautiful thing. And then that leads to a B major 7 thing. So now, like, we're really getting pretty distant from our original key of C. You get B dominant 7, which then leads to E minor 7. Again, that's the 3 of our original key of C. A major 7, D minor 7, G dominant 7, C major again. So it's like a really roundabout way of coming back around to C major, but like you get a few different 2-5-1s in there. I count 3 distinct ones. There's 2 that go towards C, and then there's one that sort of sneaks towards F in the middle of there. I didn't come up with this progression myself, actually. I saw this in one of the videos I made of this Wynton Kelly tune called "This I Dig of You," and its progression was really similar to this. And when I was sort of playing through it, I was like, well, what is the sort of scheme of this progression? And I just kind of wanted to better understand it, and I sort of devised this exercise. So I'm going to play that for you. So there, I landed back in F major, or well, I landed in the next key of the progression. I'm just going to play one of these things for because this one takes a bit longer to get through the entirety of. But yeah, again, it's just a great way to sort of get to know the seventh chords and particularly the 2-5-1 use of seventh chords. I just want to note also that when I'm playing this, feel free to do whatever you want with the pedal. I'm playing it totally dry for the sake of just like the miking and being clear for you over the internet. But I actually, I'll do any number of things where I'm like pedaling, I'll do each shape, or maybe I'll do two shapes, or like two notes at a time. Or you can just keep the pedal down and kind of have like a sort of sound bath kind of atmosphere where you're just repedaling on each harmony change. It's all good. And I actually, personally, I find like a totally dry sound, it's like kind of one of the less rewarding ways to do it. But again, I'm just trying to hopefully get it across to you over Zoom here. Okay. The next exercise that I use a lot in my playing is chromatic scales. I think we're all pretty, we all know chromatic scales pretty well. I'll just show you the particular sort of variation on using them that I use. If Josh, if you could pull that up, if the major scales kind of get me horizontally kind of comfortable along the instrument, then chromatic scales, again, they sort of are really emphasizing that sort of reach forward and backward and kind of get you vertically calibrating with how far do I need to move to comfortably reach the center of the bars and the accidentals. So my chromatic exercise is sort of something like... Another great thing about this, when you're just moving mainly horizontally around the instrument, I found that it's pretty easy to just kind of use your sort of open grip, really only controlling the stick with the first three fingers of the hand. But I think that actually when the realistic music settings sort of present themselves, and especially with chromatic scales where the motion is almost entirely forward and back, I end up, needing to use a little bit of the back fingers of the hand just to sort of clamp the butt of the stick in a little bit and just keep it a little more contained. I don't need to necessarily hold it securely like this, but just a little bit of just sort of not allowing it to stray too far from the hand, because again, just that action in the back of the hand can get a little wild if it's unchecked as you shift forward and back around the instrument. So just, getting in touch with as the speed of the exercise changes, how much back finger is required. Am I going to use is the pinky enough to keep it under control, or as the speeds get faster, actually I shift a little bit forward in the hand, and even the ring finger and middle finger even can get involved as sort of acting like that sort of just sort of control of the back end of the stick. And I think that kind of mallet control is just like pretty important for a lot of rep. Okay. So the next exercise I want to show, which I really love and I use a lot, it comes from Bob Becker. He has a collection of exercises called Becker's Best, and this is in there. It's kind of it's a way of getting really good with this sort of stride pattern that appears in a lot of ragtime xylophone, and yeah, he presents it in a way that you can play it in 12/8, but then also like it sort of has that trick rhythm thing where if you put it in 3/2, then you get this sort of syncopated. So in 12/8 it's da 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 da, but then if you put it in 3/2, then it's da 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 da. And again, just control of that sort of like syncopation is sort of what he's after. But also, this exercise is great for developing doubles on the keyboard. I find that like a good. What's great about this exercise is that it really conditions the wrist. Basically, you end up using the wrist to shift around the instrument, and this exercise basically uses like every possible direction you might use a double in. Whether that's just directly forward or diagonally, forward to the right or forward to the left or backward. This is just going to really make sure your wrist can access all of those different motions. As it turns out, the wrist is not just a single kind of like, two bones meeting. There's actually 8 tiny bones in your wrist, and they need to kind of all be kind of flexible and working for you. And so I find that an exercise like this is really great for just like conditioning that and getting those little tiny distinctions of feel in your wrist and hand going. So I'm going to demo a little bit of that. See, like it sort of tonicizes a key for the 4 chord of that key, plagal cadence back to 1, and then it like sort of modulates pretty much immediately to the next key, like 1/2 step up, and it's just a great way to work your way through all 12 keys, then back down. Okay. Again, so for all of these exercises, you just want to focus on a full sound, some kind of words and ideas that you might want to sort of use as cues when you're trying to establish like what is your baseline sound, like that you're going to maybe move from as the music requires, but like you want that baseline to be pretty full. Some of the qualities I look for is I want it to be pitchy. I want a lot of pitch in the sound. Sometimes when like a certain mallet might get like a lot of just sort of like the metallic kind of attack on a bar, and sometimes that's appropriate, but you don't want your baseline to have like a ton of kind of like grit at the front of the note. You want a nice pitchy sound. You want it to sound relaxed. You want the bar to sound open. You want the sound to feel open. You want the bar to speak relatively immediately. Now you can go a little far with that and just really like just put a premium on just immediacy, or basically like the harder you pull out of the bar, you get a lot of sound really immediately. I don't know if that's like a great baseline sound, but you do on your general playing. You want the bar speaking, relatively quickly. You don't want it working on a delay. And again, like we were saying before, we want the sound to fill the resonator underneath. You want to reach kind of the floor of the resonator if you can, or at least think of your sound doing that, because you don't want it to sound surfacey. You want it to sound like a full sort of speaking instrument. Okay, a giant influence on my thinking on this sort of thing was a book that I read this year. It was written by this guy named David Leisner. The book is called Playing with Ease. So David is he's a classically trained guitarist. He's a guitar soloist. He teaches at MSM actually, and he had focal dystonia. He had and overcame focal dystonia. It took him many, many years to do this, and in the meanwhile, he basically researched like everything he could find out about like how the body works, just trying to solve this problem for himself. He wanted to get back to playing, and he just learned an incredible amount about how really the body is kind of designed to move and how that applies to specifically music making. So it really feels like a crash course in like applied anatomy. I think he even uses that term at some point. It's very like similar to Alexander technique, although I've taken a little bit of Alexander technique instruction and I found so much new information in this book. So some of its great points that I'd just like to share is to not think in terms of the word posture, which we are often told to like consider our posture at the instrument. Instead, he suggests using the word alignment instead, because okay, so the word posture does not necessarily lend itself to the concept of moving around and shifting, you know, your body, which is what we need to do to play. And instead, alignment. You want to move with better alignment with yourself. And what happens, he thinks that when you when you play with better alignment, when you find this sort of coordination, your sound gets bigger. And I fully agree with this, by the way. And so then, okay, we need to figure out like how does our body naturally want to move at this instrument? So he makes the case that you know, the body is basically made up of a series of hinges or joints, and like so, you know, there's fingers, wrist, elbow, shoulder, you know, hips, knees, ankles, toes. You know, they're all over the place in our body. You know, we're mostly concerned with the upper body in our playing. And every one of these hinges has a range of motion, and the question is like, where in the range of motion do we want to play? He makes the case that in any hinge, let's just look at the wrist, when you move to the extreme of its ranges of motion, you activate basically tension in nearby muscles that are there to like, you know, maneuver that hinge. So when you fully extend your wrist, you activate the extensor muscles in the top part of your forearm. You can feel that like tension just sort of activate here. And same deal, if you flex your wrist all the way, then you activate the flexor muscles, which are at the underside of your forearm. And that's as true with basically any hinge you might look at. You just have to like take stock of these things and really feel the muscles involved. He makes the case that, okay, so the most relaxed place for any of these hinges to be is always going to be somewhere in its mid-range. It's never at these extremes. You don't want to like, you know, even, and I actually had kind of a misconception of like, you know, you see jazz players playing on a ride cymbal, it just seems like their like wrist is just like, it's just so lazy and it's like, oh, that's the relaxed way to play. And actually, you know, he made the case that actually, you know, you can feel tension in your forearm when you're doing that. You know, it might seem to you relaxed because you're like just allowing gravity to work on your hand, but like really actually the more neutral place for your wrist to live is basically near its mid-range of motion. You can think of tension, by the way, as like almost like muscles carrying a voltage, and you just want to have like zero voltage, you know, coursing through your muscles as you play. I mean, so that's a good way to like kind of internally take stock of like, all right, do I feel like is there like energy just in holding this position? Do I feel like a voltage in my forearm, say, or upper arm or shoulders? Okay, so in most hinges, that mid-range that we're talking about is either going to be approximately a straight line or a 90-degree angle. So let's just give a real quick rundown of like, you know, these hinges we're talking about. Finger joints, they're all based, you know, the most relaxed position, basically straight, slightly flexed. So like, you know, the end result is that they'll curve a little bit because each joint is slightly flexed. Same with the wrist, nearly straight but slightly flexed, just underneath like that. That's basically neutral. Elbow 90 degrees. Shoulder, you want the elbow hanging about like, you know, just loosely hanging away from your torso. And so then you end up with a position like this, which is just really relaxed, you know, and that's kind of where you want to have most of your playing live. That's not like you set that as your posture and you stay there, but it's more like that is the center around which you move. You want to return to that feeling of ease, you know, as frequently as the music kind of allows you to. And what happens is when you can control all the movement of those hinges with better flexibility and with like, you know, just a more kind of aware kinesthetic sense of what your positioning is, when you can move more flexibly with all this whole sort of technical structure, your phrasing becomes more fluid, basically. When you can move with better flexibility, your phrasing is more fluid. So yeah, the point is that you're not trying to find a position and lock into it. It's just you're moving around a clearly defined center of your alignment. Okay. I've also found that, yeah, when my body's better aligned, it just simplifies the experience of playing. It just makes, you know, like when that voltage is gone of tension, it makes it so much easier to feel what I'm doing. It makes like the entire arm and upper arm feel like one unit, basically. Like it doesn't feel like all these distinct components. All right. So far that's a lot of info I just threw at you. no worries if it feels a little daunting. Possibly don't try to bite it all off at once. My way with doing this was to just like take any individual idea and work it until it felt like I'd internalized it physically, and that would take 2-3 days maybe to just warm up with these concepts in mind and really check on it. So yeah, I just also want to say, like, the ideas maybe that you might find useful in what I've said, that they might not. I might not have presented it in the order that is going to make sense for you to take things on. So just let your intuition tell you, like, what is the next thing that needs solving in your playing? What seems like the low-hanging fruit for problem solving in your playing, and just go after it. So, okay, next up we're going to play a video I made. This is a transcription of a Wynton Kelly piano solo that he did over the tune Autumn Leaves. Josh, if we could play that, please. Cool.
Hey, real quick, Charlie, I just want to double check that. I just want to double check that everyone could hear that. Charlie was telling me that he had an issue hearing that, so I just wanted to make sure that we're still in contact here. If someone could just let me know if that came through clearly for them, that would be awesome. And then Charlie, just go ahead and keep on continuing. We can always play it again.
Yeah. No, I'm realizing the speaker on my sort of Zoom cart here, it must have turned itself off, I guess, after a certain.
Oh, there we go. Okay, yeah, we're good to go. The audience was able to hear, so you're good.
Great. Yeah. And I realized once you started speaking and I couldn't hear that either. Probably on my end. Okay. So yeah, first off, I want to thank Pedro Fernandez. He gave me the idea of learning vibe transcriptions like this and using real jazz solos to get better on this instrument and understanding the jazz idiom. When it comes to really learning the language of jazz, I mean, I think the best broad advice I can give is to just do tons and tons of listening and really fully focusing on it, trying to get into the sonic landscape of jazz, because I think it's when we didn't sort of grow up as the iconic jazz albums came out, it's a little harder to get into them the same way you can when the music is freshly presented. So okay, what worked for me for doing that was seeking out YouTube transcriptions. I would just search for the obvious great pianists and look up any transcriptions. I would read the transcription as I listened, and if I really liked the solo, then I would, give another listen with my eyes shut, and I would try to just really fully, immerse in the experience. And what's great about doing that is like a sort of virtuous cycle ends up developing where YouTube realizes like, oh, okay, you're kind of really into or really any jazz transcriptions, and so then it starts recommending you new things that you wouldn't have known to look up. And as long as you keep watching what it suggests, it's going to keep suggesting you more things. And I think it's just a great way to use this sort of like, algorithm-driven world we have online to like actually aid our musical ventures, basically, of like encouraging it to seek out, uncover things for you that you wouldn't necessarily know to look for. So that was going on for me for like a course of several months over the pandemic, and just really listening to a ton of jazz, I think, is really going to do the most for opening your eyes to the style. Here's a couple big takeaways that I got from just doing just tons of listening. Is one, just how loose transcriptions are. They're not like this exacting, document of exactly what the soloist is doing or even thinking about what they're playing. Because the fact is that the person soloing is rarely the person who does the transcribing. They're usually like, it's kind of the same relationship with like composers and music theorists. There's like the person that does it, and then there's like the people that are trying to best, understand what was done, and so being transcribed is not necessarily at the forefront of the soloist's mind as they're doing what they do. So then what they do is it doesn't always naturally lend itself to transcription. So some things that I've found don't naturally lend themselves to being described. There's a lot of rhythmic things. So one is like the degree of swing. Josh, if you could demo this sheet that I just used as an exercise for myself for really like exploring the degree of swing to use while playing, which basically, it takes that was the diagram about a properly aligned spine, which I just wanted to note that a properly aligned spine is not totally straight. It has a natural S curve. Yeah, okay. But then there's this sheet here, which more or less is a way of exploring the like full 100% of a beat. You start with double stops, which just should be as perfectly together as possible. Then you kind of widen them to the point that they become narrow flams and wide flams, then discernible rhythms, 16th notes, and then it kind of gets into that swinging territory where like, you don't necessarily want to just tripletize every swung rhythm you play, but you want to have like a free, navigability of that area. And you work your way, from 16s through triplets down to like what I kind of think of as like slang eighth notes, where it's like not quite real, like, accurate eighth notes, but it's just ever so discernibly off. Then you reach that kind of actual eighth notes as a center midpoint, which is just like, your sort of perfectly quantized Dr. Beat style eighth notes. And then you work your way through the flip side of the beat. You start inverting the rhythm until you get back through flams and then back to double stops at the end there. But I've just found, like jazz musicians, they have a very intuitive sense of how much swing to use on anything. It's about an ensemble finding the same amount of swing, and it's like usually not some sort of like transcribable, like, okay, they're doing definitely 16th notes or definitely triplets. It's very often what feels best is somewhere in that sort of wonkier space between those sort of like exacting sort of divisions of the beat. So that's something that's always missing from transcriptions. Something else that's always missing, the degree of horizontality or verticality that someone is playing with. And I actually find that most good jazz solos have a variety of, whether they're playing horizontally or vertically. In the same way that like I find in rap music, it's like a good verse has variety in flows. You're not just like finding one kind of thing and staying in there the whole time. It's like the same thing with jazz solos. It's idea rich. You're not just like staying in one sort of concept for all too long. Another quality I find is often missing from transcriptions. It's time feel, whether you're ahead of the beat or on the back of the beat. Again, these are things that only your ear can really tell you. And then I think a kind of almost funny thing that just like transcriptions really don't know what to make of a lot of the time is these sort of smaller rhythmic gestures which can happen, which really, like, you could define it however you want. They might be, you could call them grace notes, you could call them 16th notes, and just sometimes like there's just, you'll see it notated a certain way and you might really disagree, like I don't hear that as 16th notes. I really think that's like a grace note gesture, whatever, and whatever you're perceiving with your ears, that's right. Like there's no dogma about like, well, the page says grace notes, so it has to be, with this character, like, it's just, again, the soloist is not thinking in terms of these notational concepts. So I actually have a short video example which shows how, like, just the same rhythmic gesture that a jazz pianist is using in their right hand will get transcribed or will get notated differently, like within 2 lines of writing. Like, and you'll hear like the pianist just doing like a ban-digadum, 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 but like the way it lands around the beat is makes for such tough work for a transcriber that they end up notating it differently. And the fact is, it's just the same thing. So, Josh, if you could pull up that next video. This is from a YouTube transcription I found.
Sorry, one second. I have the wrong button.
Okay.
I think most people could hear that, but it's possible someone might not have been able to. Okay, here we go, guys. Sorry about that.
Yeah, so I hope you got that. I mean, it's just like the pianist, he's just doing one thing with his right hand. It's just this ban-digadum, ban-digadum, ban-digadum. But like, it sort of forces, it's sort of like a square peg round hole situation for the transcriber where they need to actually, make a decision with the rhythm, and it's just a tricky job for them. And I just want you to encourage to kind of to think outside of the notation. Sometimes we get these parts which seem like, okay, like it has 16th notes in this jazz vibraphone part, like, let's be really exacting. And the truth is, so much of the time that it's more of a grace note concept than anything. Or vice versa. Sometimes those grace notes can be quite rhythmicized, and you can, quote unquote, get away with it. Okay. Yeah, my point is just to not be a rhythmic literalist with jazz notation, because it's loose. It's quite loose. Okay, so another thing I learned from doing a ton of that listening is I had sort of mentioned before how the harmonic progression structures the solo. And I think it's actually like, I found the same thing with Bach. Like the harmonic progression kind of dictates the sweep, the arc of the line. You have this sense of rising energy and falling energy, and it has a lot to do with the harmony. You'll find in a lot of jazz solos that as the harmony travels further from one, as it reaches further away tonalities, then the material tends to get more creative. The jazz solos, they know that this is like what's interesting to them. This is where they want to present their most interesting creative ideas, so they might start throwing in a lot of non-diatonic things. Maybe like a new texture will appear a lot of the time. So those are the sorts of things that really should be brought out. And then usually as the progression approaches one, usually by a 2-5-1 progression, that's when the material tends to get more like traditional, and people will default to like outlining triads, blues scale things, material which is like a little bit more kind of cheap in the mind of the jazz soloist. Like it's like they're trained to just easily navigate around the instrument with these scales and outlines, and it's not as like creatively potent in their estimation. And so and then also at the end of these sort of harmonic cycles, you'll notice that kind of falling energy. Usually the solo will kind of wrap itself up or set itself up for another sort of go around the carousel with the changes if they're taking another sort of loop through them. And I think, again, these structural things are really important to keep a sense of. You want to like be tracking, where are we? Are we at one? Are we getting further from one? Are we approaching one? How is the harmony kind of steering itself? Okay. Yeah, I think again, I just want to reemphasize the best way to get an in route to this genre of music is by listening a lot. Just make the choice, make the decision to enjoy it. Be just sort of behave a little bit more like a super fan of jazz, and you'll already be doing more than most people. Listen to it in different settings, headphones, open air speakers, in your car. Go see it live. Listen in different moods, different times a day, and just try and get the whole big picture. It's a complex art form, and there's you want to find that kind of non-caricatured take on jazz. That like you don't want to just like have this concept of jazz like, oh yeah, berets and cigarettes and like that's jazz, but like you want like a sense of like the real the artists and individuals behind this music. They're brilliant. So yeah, just get really into the genre. Okay, another jazz device that I would like to present is, and this is something that is just all over our rep, is this concept called enclosures. It's the way that they kind of decorate notes, kind of again like the way that we use trills and turns and things in Baroque music or romantic music. In jazz, they use this thing called enclosures. So I think a really good way to like systemize learning this stuff. There's this lesser-known George Hamilton Green book called Modern Improvising, An Application of Ideas to Melody is the full title. And for some reason, it's just less talked about. It's kind of like a sequel to the classic G.H. Green book, which is much more well known. But in this book, he's basically like explaining like, here are the devices I use to solo. And so the basic recipe for him for decorating notes is he'll start with a major triad, and then embellish every one of those notes with its lower neighbor by 1/2 step. So. Okay, so you get comfortable doing that with every triad. And so now you have basically one side of this thing called an enclosure, then you get the upper neighbor of the note. And in that case, you're not going just a 1/2 step up, you're actually going for the diatonic step up. So if you're in the key of C, then you're going with D, because D is actually in the key. For E, it's F, so that is actually a 1/2 step. And for G, it's A, because again, you're staying in the key for the upper neighbor, and for the lower neighbor, you're doing just 1/2 step. It'll be, non-diatonic a lot of times, so. And there you have it. I mean, you've like kind of enclosed the notes of the triad. If you could pull up, there's a page from the book where he's basically just showing some of the great variations you can use with this concept of enclosures. He's just showing, I think on this page he's demoing the concept of a turn, and it's just built on this sort of embellishment of the triad. And I just think that, again, this concept is just all over jazz. This idea of enclosing the notes of a triad with their neighbor notes. Okay, let's see. I have some examples here. There's a couple in City Noir. You have dum-ba-dum. That's 2 enclosures right there. Lower down on the page, let's see, 286. Oh yeah. That's a little bit more of a fancy one. Whatever it is. But there you go. All it is just like a fancy enclosure of E. All right, Little Blue Devil, the second phrase. There you have like 3 in quick succession. There's another one. And what else? Okay, Escapades. Let's see, what 137. Yes, of course. There's an enclosure. 140. There's another sort of fancified. You're just enclosing that E. You're decorating the E. And then there's an elaborate one. Yeah, at 143. That, in my mind, that's like 7 notes right there that are all there to just sort of embellish C. You approach it chromatically from below, and chromatically from above and from below. And I think coming to understand these gestures for what they really are, they're just embellishment. It's not like a normal, traditional classical line that we're trying to sort of like get lyrically drawn out. I actually find it's more stylistically appropriate a lot of times to actually sort of like play them like woodwinds have these grace note gestures, which it's like really normal for them to accent the first grace note. It's very much not encouraged in most percussion playing, but I actually think we can treat these enclosures basically like those sort of like woodwind grace note figures, where you kind of put some weight into the front note of that. And I think that's just a really important stylistic thing about jazz to grasp, in that often these enclosures begin on syncopations, and it's right to actually put a little bit of weight on these sort of like, sort of like thrown elbow gestures that start off the beat. So that's my spiel about getting into the jazz style. If there are any questions, we have some time to address any and all questions about what I've said.
Awesome. Thanks, Charlie. Yeah, guys, this is now is the time to drop your questions into the Q&A. Anything that you want to ask Charlie, either about what he's talked in the class or other concepts about the vibraphone, that would be great. Charlie, maybe while people are ruminating on some ideas for questions, you could maybe play again some of these excerpts from the silver screen, and you could talk a little bit about some just tips and tricks about making them sound great at the audition, because those who are watching now and who will watch on the recording later, a lot of our audience is interested in this idea of pursuing a classical percussion career. So when we get tips for the audition, it's extremely helpful. So maybe while people are thinking of your questions, guys, Charlie's gonna run down some excerpts.
Yeah, let's do it. Yeah, okay, so let's talk about the West Side Story Fugue a little bit. So I think this is a great one to like deconstruct a little bit and like really get a sense of like what is the important material here, because it doesn't readily present itself like, okay, it's a strange line. It gives you all 12 tones of the keyboard in like about the first couple bars. At that point, I think it's showing you all 12 the keys. It's not like a natural 12-tone row or anything. But I think a really important thing to understand is you basically have this walking chromatic line. But it's embellished. So you have this little turn in the middle. Again, that's like a little piece of jazz sort of vocab that's all over the place. I particularly like, I think there's a Duke Ellington tune called Who Knows, I think is the name of it, where he has an album called Duke Plays Duke, and on the first track he makes this gesture like all over the place. It's a great way to like understand the phrasing of it. But you basically have this offbeat. You just kind of do like a walking bass line down. And again, also I think of this melody almost as starting on a. And to me that is a lot more clear in my mind, like as a starting point. So I like find the color I want here, and just treat the pickup as like truly a pickup. And it's more important for me to land where I want with the B, that material that starts at the B, than necessarily like putting too much stock in those first few notes. So I just treat them like a pickup. Okay, I see a couple questions have come through. Let's look at them.
Yes, I will. I'll go ahead and read them so that we can get the audio for everyone on Facebook as well. Is that we have the first question: can we use the exercises you demonstrated in order to improve skills on other mallet instruments, such as the xylophone, for example?
Oh, 1,000%. I think that's exactly the right direction to go with this stuff. I think these exercises are certainly not vibraphone specific, outside of just the use of pedal, however you want to use that. I mean, I think it's actually great to take these same exercises across the various instruments and delineate like the changes in touch and just sort of coming off of the bar in our grip and in our technique, like just understanding truly how the different instruments react to us with resonance and all these things, because I think nothing's going to make it clearer than just playing the same material across instruments and truly understanding like, oh wow, I can really lean further into the vibraphone than the xylophone. And then on the glockenspiel, I think of like, so say if the vibraphone is like the grand piano and you can really use these sort of like weighted gestures, these sort of like from the back movements, then like the glockenspiel is like the harpsichord. Like it's just you want to like just activate the keys, but like that same touch, it doesn't apply to the glockenspiel. And so like finding okay, what is my coordination in my grip that serves the sound and the resonance of the glockenspiel. I mean that's a great use of your time. It really can simplify your musical world. Okay.
Absolutely. And another question here is, how can I get better at improvisation with 4 mallets?
Yeah. I cannot speak as a great improviser with 4 mallets, but I think that playing piano, if you have experience with the piano, and really like getting used to seeing this keyboard as a source of like voicing chords, learning chord voicings, understanding what they mean to you, like the amount of range that they cover, what it means to use tighter voicings or more spaced voicings. I think that's crucial, getting really good with just like, not just the harmonies like we talked about, but just like the different ways you might voice it. Getting comfortable with, so okay, when I say voicing, I mean like the different positions that you can put a harmony in. But then on top of that, there's sort of the shadings of that, of what is your lead line in a voicing. If you're playing, it's like sort of 3 accompaniment voices and 1 lead voice. You need to find that kind of balance in your grip where you can have one voice clear, one mallet is clearly playing with a little more emphasis than the other. For me, I find that means like literally a change in stick height a lot of the time is probably the easiest way to manage it, and just getting used to them kind of starting from different heights, but nevertheless landing a clean double stop. That's I think a really important skill to develop. And yeah, I think it starts at the piano. If you have piano experience, then that's going to really open up your keyboard 4 mallet skills. And basically, I mean, I have like a crude piano technique at best, but I basically find if I can like think of it like almost like I have 2 hemispheres of my hand on piano, that's basically what I'm doing on 4 mallet keyboard stuff. And a lot of when I bring material to the piano, I try and find that kind of like, it's probably not at all like appropriate piano technique, but it's a nice analog to 4 mallet playing.
And I would just add to that I am absolutely not an improviser myself, so I don't have any personal advice about how to do this. But the people who I see who are very successful with improvising all can hear the notes in their head before they play them. And so I do think that, Charlie, what you're saying about the piano experience and chord progressions is very important, but also singing. I think you should absolutely be singing the line that you want to play in your head and making sure that you are, you're fully in command of the notes that you want to play. You hear them in your head before they come out. When you're striking the instrument, it shouldn't be like, oh, surprise. I mean, and I think that's sort of how I improvise most of the time. Is like, oh, I think I kind of know how this chord will sound, and then I choose notes. I choose chords in those notes and then chords around them. But just as an orchestra musician, it's improvised jazz vibraphone is something that's so rare for us. So it hasn't come up where I have needed to do it personally. But for those of you who are interested in that, just absolutely start learning advanced chord progressions. And there's so many resources online, like Charlie, you were mentioning, going down the YouTube algorithm rabbit hole. There are so many resources for advancing your ear training and chord progressions. And I would say, and some might disagree, but I would say the 4 mallet technique needed for jazz vibraphone is not as advanced as the 4 mallet technique that you might need for very difficult solo marimba literature. And so the harder thing by far about the 4 mallet jazz vibraphone technique is that you need to, as we're saying, be in complete command of things like voice leading and knowing, being very, very aware of the harmonic progressions, because it's going to matter how you use the pedal. It's going to matter, which notes you damp, which notes you bring out. So, it really gets into the theory and harmonic progressions of what's going on. So I would push everyone in that direction. If you're interested, start there first, have that be your foundation. And hopefully this class, as you're seeing what Charlie just presented for you, tons of exercise, doing lots of exercises going through scales and modes and arpeggios. That will definitely help you improve. So I think, Charlie, your class was very relevant for that question.
Thanks. Yeah, I think every instrument has its natural improvisatory idiom, which has a lot to do with like how our body naturally adjusts to it. And I think another great source of ideas for that is to study the transcriptions of like particularly great jazz vibraphonists, not just like pianists or trumpet players or saxophone players. And instead, like, picking out like a Gary Burton transcription, okay, what ideas is he bringing to the keyboard? Like specifically what works for him on jazz vibraphone. And that idiom of just the language he's chosen, you don't have to necessarily choose it for yourself, but you can understand, okay, this lays well. And he realized that, and so he like can really use this with ease, which is not always the case for like what sort of lays well on the piano or what works on a saxophone or trumpet. So really getting comfortable with the specific idiom of our, mallet keyboard, I think is really worthwhile.
And in that vein, this is not always possible, depending on, you who just asked the question. I won't say your name in case you want to stay anonymous, but if it is within your budget, if it is financially possible for you, absolutely the first step before anything else, if you truly want to take it seriously and get good, is buy a vibraphone. And owning an instrument and having an instrument is something that can be difficult as a percussionist, because we need to own so many different instruments and they take up a lot of room and they're expensive, they're difficult to travel with. But if you have one particular thing, if you truly in your life you want to become a timpanist, at some point it's a good idea to buy timpani. If you really want to be an all-star marimba player, you should do everything and you can. Try to find scholarships, try to find people who support you, try to find a donor, something, beg your parents, do a part-time job, save your pennies, get an instrument on loan, get an instrument on rent, buy a used instrument, search online for used instruments. And that owning your own instrument gives you such a deeper connection to your mission and your vision for yourself. So just sort of that's more of like a nuts and bolts type of advice. But we do have another question coming through here, which is, I know that Stevens grip, and that's what I use. Oh, sorry. I know the Stevens grip, and it's what I use on all the keyboards. Do you think it's necessary to learn another grip in order to play vibraphone, or is it better to get accurate with your skills just using one grip?
I think there's never any harm in learning new grips and experimenting with them and seeing what feels most appropriate to you. I mean, I get that like there's like a feeling of sunk costs of like I put so much time into like developing this one type of grip and it's just what I'm going to be best at. But I think I think Stevens was developed with the marimba literature in mind, and I think there's a lot of jazz playing with either traditional cross grip or Burton grip, and why not just like spend some time with them? And they all have their different advantages and disadvantages, and I've never known Stevens to be like a necessarily like improvisatory grip, like conducive to doing that. But if you have ease doing that, then like there's no shame in just use Stevens grip. I mean, I personally just use traditional in almost every case for four mallet playing, and that is really just because I've spent the most time playing that way. But I think again, if I found some piece of music or situation where I'm like, man, like just Stevens is just going to be what I use on this piece, then just pick and choose. I mean, it's just a menu of options, these grips for you.
One of the reason that Stevens is so popular for the marimba is because at the lower end of the marimba, the intervals get so wide that it's nice to have some additional control over individual mallets with this very wide, spread of intervals that you have. And you also have a little bit more control. This is debatable, but I think the idea is that you have a little bit more control over each independent mallet with Stevens grip. And because, as Charlie's saying, on vibraphone, so much of what you're doing has to do with the harmonic progression and playing chords quickly and changing your chords so quickly. And in general, you're probably just playing more notes in a shorter amount of time. The notes are more condensed and they're faster a lot of times. I think it's very, if you seriously want to play it, I think it would be worth it to try. I would take 2 weeks out of your life and just say, all right, I'm going to give Burton Grip on vibraphone a shot and see how it goes. And if there's any part of it that's better for you than Stevens Grip, then you're probably onto something, and you might want to continue down that pathway. But I would say most professional percussionists, I would say most people who end up doing a full-time career in classical percussion can play one grip, at the very least, one 4-mallet grip very well. And usually they can play a secondary grip for certain situations. So like my main grip, I'm just like you. You who asked the question, I also play Stevens Grip, but I do play a few things, both traditional or Burton, like if I'm playing a multi-percussion setup, or if I'm playing a quick lick on Glock, and it's just easier to play some sort of cross grip. Even though I don't play it that often, I'm still very happy that I've worked on cross grips for certain situations. So I would say, I've always been jealous of Charlie being able to play the the various things that he does easily, and I'm sure you can say the same thing for people who play Stevens, like, oh, it'd be nice to play that 10th so easily just to get there or whatever. So you're always jealous of each other depending on which grip you choose, but you gotta try to do both.
Yeah, I've seen Josh play Merlin with his Stevens Grip, and it's like, man, that level of ease with my cross grip, I mean, like, good luck.
It's hard to get that wide, right?
Yeah, oh yeah. And I mean, I agree with everything you said about the advantages of Stevens Grip, and I also find that it allows, like, the shifting of intervals. Really, I think it's easier with Stevens Grip to just rapidly change from wide to narrow. Cross grip is a little bit, you have to be a little bit more exacting and careful with it. But I think with the advantage of traditional grip is that you can throw weight a little bit more naturally. You can use a sort of like more a throwy type of use of weight. And I think Burton really allows you to just sing with one mallet very easily. Just like directly use one mallet to play lines. And they all have their, you can do all these things with all these grips, but just some of these have the natural advantage, which is why they were devised, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. Guys, we're now heading towards the end of the class, so if you have any more questions, now is the time. Get them down in there into the Q&A. Charlie, did you get to cover everything that you wanted to? I
think we did. I mean, it was a lot.
Yeah, that was a packed class, guys. You guys got a buffet, a feast. You got a vibraphone feast. I hope that everyone really understands the value of what Charlie's bringing, and I know that he mentioned it, that it's very dense. Charlie is an academics percussionist for sure. He gets very into all sorts of books and readings and materials that a lot of us percussionists sometimes gloss over, or we'll read one method book or something. Charlie is the type of musician who will read cover to cover multiple pieces of literature on a single topic. So, we did include the PDF there of all of the exercises. And Charlie also has a website that opening up fairly soon, which is exciting. And when that goes up, there'll be lots of offerings from him there. And so, guys, do make sure that you're following Charlie. He has a very active Instagram page, and there's lots more to learn for continued education from Charlie. But if there are no further questions, I believe that is the class. So maybe, Charlie, you could leave us with some final thoughts, and then I'll sign us off.
Yeah, well, just thanks to everyone that's watching. It really, it's I've never done an online class like this before, so this was like a real blast. I wish I could see your faces and just have like a the easy, natural back and forth that we might be able to have in person. But this has been really fun. Josh, thank you for moderating. This has been really smooth, and thanks for handling all the materials and videos all so well and organizing it. Yeah, thank you so much for having me. Absolutely. And guys, thank you so much for being here. Without
without you in the audience, you know, we're not doing anything. So you guys are the ones who are making it possible. And if you do have, you know, I say this in every class, broken record, but if you do have the ability to make a donation for today's class for Charlie, that would be, you know, a really amazing thing, because it helps us continue to put on these classes. So if you guys are there in the audience, you're getting a lot of value out of it, please go ahead. The link is in our bio, and I will write it here and say it out loud for everyone. It's linktr.ee/the PC. And not only can you make a donation there, guys, but you can also sign up for the rest of our classes. You can find all the recordings of our previous classes there. So we use that link really to hold all of our important stuff. You can also apply for our scholarship there, which now, you know, the deadline didn't seem so far away, but now the deadline is rapidly approaching for the scholarship. So make sure you guys who are interested, it's a $1,000 scholarship. And, you know, all of our artists are providing this content for us so that we can, you know, generate a lot of excitement around the Percussion Conservatory and make some sales which help fund our scholarship. So that's really the big mission, is for everyone here, is to send you guys to school, you know, over time for less money, which would be awesome, is to support, you know, support and advance percussion education throughout the whole world. That's our goal. So Charlie, thanks for taking the first step, for doing your first online class with us. It was excellent. And guys, until the next one, it will be with Marcelina Sahutska. She'll be doing in basically, I think, the same room, right, Charlie, on Glockenspiel?
I think so. Yeah.
So we'll be right back here at the New World Symphony Center, and Marcelina will be presenting on Glockenspiel. But guys, let's give it up. All of us at home, let's give it up for Charlie. It was an awesome class, and we're very, very happy to have you here doing this, Charlie, and to many more. Yeah?
Yeah.
Okay, awesome. Guys, take care. Have a great morning, afternoon, or night, wherever you are in the world. This has been another masterclass with the Percussion Conservatory. Bye-bye. Take care.